Okay, next we're going to deal with complex numbers. And again, reminder, you can add or subtract only if things are alike. You can multiply or divide anything. So therefore, when we're adding, subtracting complex numbers, the parts that are alike can be added. So therefore, 3 and negative 2, those are alike. You can put them together, gives you a 1. Positive 2i and a positive 4i can be put together. That'd be positive 6. The I stays I. It doesn't change. Now, if you have subtraction, just remember the minus in front of parentheses mean you're subtracting the whole thing. So the first thing I like to do is go ahead and distribute that negative. That'd be a minus 6 and a minus I. And then again, we're just looking for things that are alike. 4 and negative 6 are alike. We're putting them together. Negative 3i, and if there's no number in front, it's understood to be 1. So negative 3i, negative 1i would be a negative 4i. And that's the right answer. Now, multiplication, though, let's skip down to 4. Multiplication, you can multiply or divide anything. We're only going to combine the parts that are alike. So I do want to point out that inside parentheses, you have a minus sign. So therefore, there are two terms inside parentheses. This 2i is going to be multiplied by both of them. Also notice these are not alike. Negative 5 minus 4i cannot be put together as they are. So that's the reason we don't just go ahead and combine them. So we're going to multiply 2i, first off, times negative 5. Multiply the 2 times negative 5. Leave the I alone because it doesn't combine with anything. Then 2i times negative 4i would be negative 8. 2 times negative 4. Then I times I must be multiplied as well. Now let me remind you about your powers of I. I to the first power, I to the second power, I to the third power, I to the fourth power, and then so on and so forth. Anytime you have I to a power, it can be replaced with whatever it's equal to. So let's not stop here. Let's leave negative 10i alone. It's not to a power, it's to a first power, so we're just going to leave it. And then negative 8, this I squared, we're going to replace with what it's equal to, so we're going to replace it with a negative 1. So this is actually negative 10i, then negative 8 times negative 1, which is a plus 8. So it pretty much just changes the sign. Now, I do want you to get into the habit of putting the real stuff first, putting the imaginary stuff second. So 8 minus 10i would be your final answer. Let's work one to where we have to FOIL it out. Notice again where the plus sign is, where the minus signs are, okay? If you have two terms and two terms, they have to be FOILed. You're going to take 4 and multiply it by each of these. To multiply, we only combine the stuff that's alike. 4 times negative 1, that's no problem. 4 times 3i is a positive. 4 times 3 is 12. Leave the I alone. We're done with a 4. Let's do the same thing with 2i. 2i times negative 1 is a negative. 2 times 1 is 2. Leave the I alone. And then 2i times 3i is a positive 6. 2 times 3. I times I must also be multiplied. And again, from what I told you a while ago, anytime you have I to the second, we replace it with negative 1. So you have negative 4. I'm going to go ahead and put those together. They're alike. You can add and subtract when things are alike. That's positive 10i. And then 6i squared will actually be negative 6. Negative 4 and negative 6 can now combine. That'll be negative 10 plus 10i. That's your final answer. Now, number 6, I've already told you that anytime you have a radical on bottom, like 6 over the root 3, you multiply top and bottom by that radical. This is the exact same thing because if you don't remember, I is actually a radical. It's a square root of negative 1. So what we're going to do is anytime you have an I on bottom, which let's take care of that 6 and 12 first. Let's reduce it to 1 and 2. And anytime you have an I on bottom, you're going to multiply top and bottom by that I. So on top, you now have 1 times I, or just I. On bottom, you have 2. I times I would be I squared. So therefore, anytime, again, that you have an I squared, we replace it with negative 1. So the bottom is 2 times negative 1, or just negative 2. So you could write it like that, or if you'd like to put the negative out front, I think it actually looks a little bit better. So negative I over 2. We're not leaving i's on bottom. Same thing on number 7. We're going to multiply top and bottom by I. Now notice there's two terms on top. They both have to be multiplied by I because of that minus sign. So on top you have 3i minus 4i squared. And on bottom you have just plain I squared. So we're going to change all of our I squares to negative 1s. So therefore we have on top 3i, and then negative 4 times negative 1 will be plus 4. And on bottom we have I squared, which is negative 1. Now on these, definitely, we're always going to split these up. So we have 3i over negative 1, and then plus 4 over negative 1. Positive divided by negative is a negative. Now, again, get into a habit of writing this part of your answer first. So that's going to be a negative 4. And this will be 3 divided by negative 1. Again, you can divide anything. Just focus on the things that are alike. 3 and negative 1 gives you a negative 3. Leave the I alone. So there's your final answer. Now, just like we did before, anytime you have a binomial on bottom, just like we did with radicals, we're going to multiply top and bottom by its conjugate. And that's going to take care of that radical or that I on bottom. So on top, we're multiplying everything by 2. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times negative I, nothing's alike, so we leave them as negative 2i. Negative 4i times 3 is going to be negative 12i. Negative 4i times negative I will be a positive. Negative times a negative is a positive. Leave the 4 alone. I times I is I squared. On bottom, since they're conjugates, you only have to multiply 3 times 3. And then positive I times negative I, which is negative I squared. Replace all your I squareds with negative 1s. So this positive 4i squared on top will turn out to be a minus 4. And then this just plain old I squared here is going to be a negative 1. So on top, you can combine the 6 minus 4, which is 2. Negative 2i and negative 12i are alike. Again, that's the reason we can combine them. We can subtract them. That's negative 14i. Then on bottom, we have 9 minus negative 1, which is 10. We always look to split it. 2 over 10 minus 14 over 10i. The 2 over 10 reduces to 1/5. There we go, minus sign. 14 over 10 would be 7/5, and then leave the I alone, and we can leave our answers like that. You could turn them into decimals if you wanted to, but I'm just going to leave it like that. Okay, last problem. Again, I'm not going to work this all the way out, but just remember, anytime there's a plus or a minus sign, if you're squaring it, you have to multiply everything times everything. You have to FOIL this out. So we're going to write it as 6 plus 2i times itself, multiply 6 times both of these, multiply 2i times both of these, and then just combine your like terms.